new running mate, Tiara Lusk, with the Life and Liberty Party. This is our first video since our convention this weekend when we were chosen. This ticket was chosen. So we just thought we'd get together and record a short video to let people out there know that we're here and that we're running. Our campaign is off the ground, and we wanted to let people know a little bit about what we stood for and why we're here and where we're going. So my perspective, I've been a political activist for many years. I've been involved in the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, the Reform Party, the Alaskan Independence Party, the Constitution Party, and I don't know if I left anything out, but now the Life and Liberty Party. And but the main thing being that, you know, political parties are supposed to be repositories and institutions to carry forth knowledge and ideals. And so all of those parties at one time claim to or profess to champion constitutional freedoms and liberties. And so over time, I became disillusioned with what was going on in a lot of the parties and along with a lot of the other people out there. And so the Life and Liberty Party seemed like it became increasingly necessary. And I like to think of us as kind of like a pro-life libertarian party or a pro-liberty constitutionist party. But I think we're a centrist party in that we are firmly founded on the center. Our center foundation is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence as originally intended by the founders. So that's what brings me here, is to try to get this party going. And running mate, Tiara, do you have anything to add to that? What brings you here?
Well, as soon as I heard about the Life and Liberty Party, I looked at their platform. I was just impressed with how courageous and bold it was with addressing core root of a lot of the issues, which I feel like a lot of parties kind of gloss over. They're a lot of times looking for band-aid solutions to problems instead of looking at what the core root of what's really causing it. So from my perspective, being a project manager, and especially with related in the areas related to organizational management and structuring, I just know that within business organizations, the more limited the organizational structure is, or I would say the more minimalistic it is, the more flexible it allows the organization to be in adapting to change. And so why not use the same management principles with a political organization? I feel like a lot of this overregulation, excessive laws bogs down our system a lot. And it causes us to be able to become inflexible, to be able to adapt to change. The world is constantly changing around us. The political climate, the international relations situation, these things are technology is changing and advancing at a rapid pace. And that's something that I feel like we have also not been able to keep up with as effectively as we probably should. So what I liked about the Life and Liberty Party was your message. I was also really impressed with J.R. Myers' debate with the free and open debates. And that's what got me interested in talking to J.R. He seemed like a very wise and knowledgeable person. So that's that's a team that I'd want to be a part of.
Well, thanks. We're glad to have you as part of the team. There were 3 candidates that were vying for vice president. So I'm honored that there was such interest, and I'm glad that we have such a solid team now, and we definitely have our work cut out for us, that's for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So coming up, we are looking for electors in Arkansas. We do have ballot access in Arkansas already, excuse me, but we do need to find our electors and alternate electors there, so we're working on that. We're also looking at Colorado and Tennessee, and we'll be looking at Louisiana, Vermont. Those are the easy ones to start off with. And there's some other potentials out there as well that we're in communication with state party leaders in a couple other states that still have a open ballot line at this time. So, and then there's the whole write-in effort. So on the states where we won't be able to get in on the ballot as independents or with a party, we will be able to, in many of the states, have an official write-in status. So this all takes a lot of on the ground grassroots organization and planning, and also some money. So we do have a money bomb going out that's started. So we're asking people, if you want to help support the cause of life and liberty, the Life and Liberty Party and the Life and Liberty Coalition, please donate to the money bomb, because that's very important. Money, as they say, is the mother's milk of politics, and that is very true. Unfortunately, whether you agree with it or not, we do have to have some funds. And we've been able, this party's probably, the culmination of almost 2 years of work. So it's really the last year we've started to really coalesce. And then now is the true test, we'll be taking off in this electoral process. I've already appeared on the ballot in Idaho and in California, but those were on other parties' tickets. It was an interesting time. I was able to debate in Boise and in Chicago, and so that showed some electoral strength, and we do have a lot of support out there. But it's really good if we can build electoral ballot qualification under the Life and Liberty Party or under our coalition members directly, because that's how we'll build the grassroots by state organization. And by the way, we do have a couple interviews coming up that I just want to mention before I forget. And one is with Free and Equal with Christina Tobin, and it's a follow-up on the Chicago debates. And so I hope that both of us can participate in that. That's coming up very soon. And then there's another one. I'm always forgetting the name on that one. But needless to say, we're going to be lining up a lot of media interviews, and we'll be out and about to as many events as we can during this, these shutdowns. Of course, we are advocating for an opening of the country, and it had to have with personal responsibility, but personal responsibility is nothing new, and hygiene's nothing new. Public hygiene's nothing new. These are things that go back to ancient times. So we just have to keep our heads and remember we can still maintain our civil liberties while maintaining individual responsibility. They always went hand in hand, and they still should. So we should never sacrifice, liberty for security. As it is said, those who do so deserve neither. So even in this COVID crisis, as it is stated, we still could maintain our constitutional liberties and the proper balance of government and society, and without jeopardizing ourselves unnecessarily, but still without sacrificing our liberties. Anyway, I'll be quiet and let you speak. Turn it over.
Oh, I would just like to add to that. I have an archaeologist friend that's an expert in certain language hieroglyphics. He's the only one that can read certain ancient hieroglyphics, and he was featured on a TV show recently with the History Channel. But he's always so he's attacked so often for having these kinds of views in his field that he doesn't really feel like he can publicly say it. So I'll keep his name. I won't disclose his name at the moment. Okay. So he doesn't get fired for his job. But one of the things that has really impressed me about his observations and study of history is that all long-sustaining civilizations throughout history have been primarily focused on conservative values. And that, to me, even includes environmentalism. So I think, yes, of course, we need to take care of the earth and our resources. And I'm a big advocate for that. The only reason why I think that's not always being addressed as a conservative issue is that the left wing has tended to claim the narrative on that for themselves, and only because they advocate big government as a solution to fix that problem. So, but it doesn't have to be a liberal policy. It can be something conservationist. And so right. That's something that's also really big for me and the people in my state in Idaho, because we have a lot of natural resources here. Idaho's called the gem state because of all the gems and other minerals, rare earth minerals that we have here in Idaho. And I've been working with the Idaho Mining Association to try to help decrease our dependency on foreign imports by utilizing our own resources, but doing it responsibly. And so that's a big issue for me. And I definitely got my work cut out, starting to get those 1,000 signatures in Idaho. And I started already this morning at my CrossFit gym, trying to
Awesome.
rally up support.
Good. Yes, I also believe in we need to focus on rare earth elements, and those are big in Idaho as well. As far as our future, looking towards the future and development and our foreign policy and all of that. But let's see here. Oh, you can hear me fine, can't you? The volume's good. We're just having a technical check here. All right. So I was just thinking too, the other thing that's really focused my attention these days is this mounting debt crisis and how the government's responding towards this, what I think is a manufactured political crisis to a large extent, as far as the reaction and the seizure of power that's occurred as a result. And so that's this mounting public debt and the implementation of these radical leftist policies that are occurring. And as we can see, they're not allowing any crisis to go to waste. So they're really milking this thing, and they're trying to amp it up as to make it as much of a crisis as possible to score a lot of to gain a lot of power, frankly, and they're not wanting to relinquish this power. So I think we need to speak out about that, because it's not just the curtailment of immediate civil liberties that's at risk, it's the financial devastation that's going to be left in the wake of this, and the generations that will be left in bondage if they continue to pass these multi-trillion-dollar debt packages, relief packages, because frankly, a debt means that there's a future obligation to repay. So who's going to be responsible to repay these debts, and to whom will we be repaying these debts? And it seems to me that a lot of the financing is continuing to come from our enemies, or those who appear to be at odds with us. I won't go into detail on that, but why are we creating a future of perpetual indentured servitude for the bulk of our population, when truly the answer, I believe, is a universal debt jubilee, which is an ancient and biblical answer, which is basically just a reset of the economy, because there's no economic system in existence that's really perfect. And so every system does tend to, over time, lead to distortions in certain areas. And so always an economic elite and a centralization of power will occur. It's just kind of a natural thing. So the debt jubilee was a way to reset the economy to account for that type of phenomenon. Thoughts?
So that's actually one of the main things that attracted me to your party. You're the only party that I know of that's really promoting an idea like that. Even a lot of conservative parties talk about how we need to pay off this national debt and all of these, we need to find some way to do that, right? But to me, it just seems at this point it would be impossible, and we would not want to burden future generations with something like that. So, when I've been looking at that situation, not only the national debt that we have, but also a lot of the other obligations that we have through pensions and such.
Right.
That adds even a few more trillions. So the amount of debt that we really have is at least twice as much as what we think it is. So to me, that's so overwhelming. I just don't imagine that it would really be possible to pay that off at any time. So, so my thought is, and it's just like with a bank loan too. A lot of times you can barely make the interest payments on it, to the point where you never even get to touch the principal on it. It never seems to come down, just gets higher and higher. So something like that is, I think it's way too overwhelming and very much unfair to future generations. I believe our children deserve better than that.
Yes, we're in absolute agreement on that. And it's just irresponsible for our so-called leaders, which they're not our leaders, they're our servants, these public servants, is that we need to keep referring to them as public servants, because they are indeed the servants of the people. They're not our leaders or our masters, as they might imagine themselves to be in their vain imaginations. But yes, their schemes are full of destruction and bondage, and we have to warn the people, what's in store for them and for their children and grandchildren, because it's not a very hopeful prospect if we continue down this path of huge debt bondage. Bonds come from the same root word as bondage. It means to capture, to hold, to secure. So, bondage. We don't want bondage through debt bonds or
Right. Yeah.
whatever they propose. We want a debt jubilee, right?
That's a very
So
liberal,
that's just one thing. I just want to go,
literal. That's a very literal association.
right?
Yeah, it's just,
Yes, well, it
I
is
like the
true.
way that you put that.
Thank you. Now I want to go back to what you said about the stewardship aspect, or what you said about conservationism, and I wanted just to throw that in there, that yes, stewardship is our moral duty, and we don't need a government to enforce a Green New Deal. What we need is people individually and then collectively through their different, through families and through their community governments and the different boards and stuff that are charged locally to look after these environmental affairs. We need to take responsibility for our own stewardship. How do we process waste? How do we consume things? How do we? What's our relationship to the material world as an individual? It's more of an individual thing, and the change is going to happen on an individual level from the grassroots up. Individual environmental consciousness of environmental stewardship comes from a life-based philosophy that's just part of, we want good stewardship of the environment, so we have a healthy environment so that we can have healthy people, healthy children, healthy pets, healthy plants, healthy food, all of it. So
We
that's
can
where the stewardship,
sustain
and it's
life.
an individual thing that starts.
Yeah.
Sustaining life, a life-sustaining
Yeah.
philosophy. It doesn't come from the top down.
Yeah.
It comes from the
That's
people.
part of the, that's part of the life and liberty party concept.
Definitely.
Things that sustain life over a long period of time. And so going along with that, go ahead if you want to.
And it can be done
continue.
through private enterprise. It doesn't have to be done through public or government. And I'm not saying that all public or government's bad, because I do believe in, communal efforts through things like as churches, or through like community boards or things like that, or even sometimes like the interstate system. We all enjoy the benefits of the interstate highway system. So, but ultimately it does go back to the individual and our understanding of what our place is, who we are, what our place is in the world, and our responsibility. It's responsibility. We talk a lot about rights, right? Everybody wants to, assert their rights, but there are always corresponding responsibilities that go with the rights. And so stewardship is a corresponding responsibility as well as a right, because stewardship also involves private ownership of property, because we know that there's pride of ownership, right? As opposed to being a tenant for a master, and then you don't care about the property then, do you? Because you have no say or no benefit in it. Anyway, go on. Go ahead, Tiara.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. I'm a adjunct business management professor, and I teach classes on economics and also just management generally. And there are many ways to go about holding companies and other organizations accountable for maintaining a healthy environment.
Right.
So a lot of major corporations have been so highly pressured by groups that would affect their marketing and affect their profit making just by the negative ad campaigns. A lot of corporations have voluntarily chosen to do a lot of things to be environmentally sustaining, that
Right.
when the government hasn't necessarily had to step in, all we have to do is use the power of the purse,
Consumer advocacy.
boycott companies.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Individual responsibility, boycott businesses that
We have.
that are destroying the environment here and in the other countries. So.
Right. Yeah, you have a lot of private or nonprofit organizations, voluntary associations. People were big on voluntary association, right? Freedom of association. So people can form and coalesce and reform different groups around different issues as they want to or as they need to, and that's how it should be. And each state can be a different representation of the constituents they're in, as far as their application of environmental laws or economic laws or whatever it may be. But my main concern is just that it's constitutionally based, that we have a republic which guarantees the rights of the minorities, as well as gives us a certain and wise framework of balanced powers between the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. I think it was genius. I know we hear a lot of people, tear down these statues. We don't need all this stuff from the ancient dead white men, whatever. But I think the Constitution's far more than just a political document. I think it's a social contract, and it has stood the test of time. And if we need to change parts of it, there are definitely ways to change it. I'm against, and as our party at convention, we took a stand against what's it called? The Article 5 Constitutional Convention. Yes, thank you. As probably a misguided and uncontrollable kind of exercise. But we do need to uphold the Constitution. We can amend it. There are means to amend it without destroying the entire document. So our party is firmly in favor of the rule of law based upon our understanding of the original interpretation of the Constitution. That does mean a decentralization of power in my mind, because the federal government has asserted itself and intruded itself into so many areas. It's usurped the rights of the states and of the people, most certainly. So we need to curtail the federal government, and we need to redistribute those powers back to the states and the localities, and indeed to the individual sovereign people. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, to me, it's kind of like the idea of trying to take an engine from a Jeep and trying to put it into a tractor and expecting it to run efficiently. So, not to say that there cannot be amendments made to the Constitution or the organizational structure as it was given that would be compatible with helping the system improve or run more efficiently. But a lot of the proposed changes that we see are not helping the Constitution run more efficiently. So that's the thing. When you're trying to make a major transition between one organizational structure to another, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. And you also have to make sure the systems are going to be compatible and working together. All of that is very difficult. It takes somebody with a solid organizational strategy to figure out how the best ways to do that, right? So that's where I'm coming from as an organizational development person. I look at organizational structures and I see ways that making certain changes could help improve efficiency in organizations, or ways that propose changes that would just bog it down and make it yeah,
unnecessarily complex.
Yeah, sometimes my brain is going so fast that I'm like trying to choose between 3 or 4 words that I think are like, sure, which one is the most accurate. And then I just like get clogged up. So, but yeah, okay. You know what I mean.
This is live. No. Excellent. So yes, the Constitution. Let's go back to the Constitution as far as, um, you know, really it is a decentralizing document, and it does put the power really, the Constitution limits power. It doesn't grant power. I mean, it gives very limited power to the federal government. But the document really, it articulates the existing rights, the universal human rights is what it does. It's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's the original Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, this Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution. That's it. Everything else is derived from that, really. And I want to preserve that. I don't think we need a fundamentally new understanding or re-envisioning of that. And that's what I think a Article 5 convention would destroy, is that legacy and that concept of our God-given individual rights and the sovereignty that's derived from that. That's what makes us the masters, and the government, again, our servants. Without those guarantees, without that fundamental understanding, which is, we find so many of the people are so poorly educated now through the public, what I've heard called the public fool system, and through just the propaganda of the media, which is no longer journalism, but is merely an extension of propaganda for the globalists. There is no fundamental consensus any longer as to the nature of humanity, what we are, who we are, where our rights are derived. And so I fear opening up such a convention would allow the dismissal of the foundations of our rights, which would open it up to government being the guarantor of rights, which we've seen historically has always led to mass death and war, starvation, when the state becomes God. And we see that even today in totalitarian dictatorships like North Korea and others. So that's what I think is being pushed, actually, and I think we must resist that. These revolutionary forces, I think the Constitution allows us to move forward in peaceful mechanism. It provides peaceful mechanisms to move forward and to enact the necessary changes. We don't need to embrace like a counter-revolutionary or revolutionary kind of destructive nihilism that as they say, the new boss is just as bad as the old boss. We don't need that kind of scene. I'm not into that. I'm for utilizing the existing structures to restore the vitality of the republic that was, again, given to us through great wisdom and sacrifice. And that's what I hope to represent as the candidate for the Life and Liberty Party. And I hope that our team can successfully promote this vision, because I think this is the vision of hope that the people really want to hear and they need to hear right now. And we don't need to be saying, oh, which statues should be torn down next. We don't need to go into anarchy and mob rule. Yes, there has been injustice. Yes, things can be better, but we have to do it through a peaceful means. We can find the way to allow people's voices to be heard without silencing the voices of others. We can all be heard without demonizing one another. We can come together in a consensus that is based on constitutionally firm foundations. That is what our ancestors have given us, and we must, through our due diligence, and that's what I see the Life and Liberty Party, we must continue to fight for that ideal, and that's my hope and my vision.
Yeah, I agree. And in my study of many ancient civilizations, I've noticed that, and many cultures today, many of their primary values are focused on conservative values, family, personal responsibility, things that sustain life, sustain
Yes.
civilization.
Yes.
So those are the kind of foundations that I would like to see our country focus on again. It seems too easy for people to go off on wild tangents, and causes a great deal of turmoil. Not that some institutionalized injustice doesn't exist and should be corrected.
Right.
But I think the president's role is not to foment hatred.
No.
It's not to encourage it. It's not to encourage division through inflammatory things to say. It's to promote unity and healing as best as we
Yes.
can, and then
Yeah.
also to leave it to the legal system, that our legal system was designed the way it was for the purpose of redressing grievances, and we should use it as such. That's the method that we have been given to address conflicts in our society. And instead of, I think as president, it needs to be a more minimalist role where not trying to take on creating or making new laws for themselves. That's the job of the Justice Department and the judicial
The
branch of
legislature.
government. Yeah. So yeah, I think I
Right. I
think
agree.
I think the primary role of the president and vice presidential team, the executive, essentially, is to promote positive messages to the people, to give people hope.
Yes.
It's very difficult in times like in tumultuous times for people to feel that we have hope. And in a situation like that, when you feel like you're on a losing team, just like in sports, right? If you feel like you're on a losing team, what's the point? You just want to give up, right? But I don't think America
Right.
is the
Right. Yeah.
losing team. Sometimes people look at it like, oh, we're already defeated. We may as well just throw in the towel and just start a new government. You know, I've heard different, even freedom parties, supposed freedom advocate parties, that talk about how we should just throw away the Constitution and start over. I
Right.
don't really
No.
think
No.
that's the solution. You know, the solution
No.
is reinstate this pride in the team, the organizational structure that we've been given. We're still America. We're still a winning team, and help our people have a sense of hope that
Yes.
things can turn around. I think that it's very possible, if we can resolve our disputes here, that we can still see America's greatest days ahead of us.
Right. We need more, less smoke and heat and more light. And so a lot of
Yes.
people are now
Yeah.
taking, in the political realm, they're taking advantage, and they're really polarizing the people more and more. And as you said, dividing people for political gain. And we don't need that. We need to come together for our common interests while we still can, because America is a great nation, but our strength, as fabulous and fantastic and wonderful and true as it is yet fragile. And it comes back down to the individual hearts that I was talking about earlier. And when we turn our hearts off and we grow cold towards one another and indifferent towards one another, that's when we can act in these egregious and callous and destructive ways without conscience. And we need to combat that. That's really where the battle is within each of our own hearts. And in how do we be the person and the neighbor that we were made to be, that we were created to be. I believe personally, that each of us have a mission, and we were sent here, we were created with a mission, so that when we find that mission, or we walk towards that mission, that's when we find our happiness and our fulfillment. So I think we should have a life nurturing society that helps people to walk towards their mission. And we need to reject this violence and, again, the nihilism and self-serving destruction and power mongering that a lot of these so-called leaders are trying to gain authority and power through this fear, intimidation, and division. We have to reject that outright. That's not what was given to us. That's not how we will move forward. That's not who we are as a people.
I recently read a quote from Winston Churchill that said, back in his day, he said, the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists.
Right.
And I think that's certainly true. It's very deceptive what they're trying to do. And essentially, a lot of people are fooled by the idea that they're trying to help free people, but actually they're just bringing them further into servitude.
Exactly. And, that's another thing that disturbs me about the tearing down of the statues and all of that. They're trying to erase history and saying, it's bad, we have to erase it. But what they're doing is they're condemning us to repeat it, because they're removing it from our consciousness. Yes, we may need to address some
Right.
of these so-called racist monuments or these egregious memorials for whatever reasons. I mean, there are many reasons why these things were put up and many reasons why people could be offended. But do we just let the mobs tear them down? Or perhaps would it be more in the line of wisdom to erect a museum, an interpretive center to say, look, this was a dark chapter in history. Look at this. Remember, if we go down that path, what awaits us? But don't tear it down and obliterate it as though it didn't exist. It's no better than the Taliban blowing up the ancient, Buddhist statues. You don't have to be a Buddhist to be aggrieved by that kind of destruction and that erasing of human memory and history. How do we move ahead? How do we advance if we continue to give ourselves self-inflicted amnesia? It's not the way forward. We can't do that. There are many better ways, wiser ways, and we have to hold those accountable that are just like rampantly raging and destroying with seeming impunity. We must hold them accountable. We must hold ourselves
Yeah,
accountable.
I do find the people who are intentionally inciting divisions and violence between groups, I find their actions to be particularly egregious.
Yes.
And especially since they do it in the name of liberty and equality, and
or even God.
They do it in the name of virtuous principles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, we can't remain silent and allow those types of demagogues to continue, because they're really leading to the fracturing of society. And people are desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. That's well known, and they don't need these demagogues whipping up the flames of discontent and rumor, and then scapegoating and targeting other segments of society. I mean, yes, divide and conquer. We certainly have been divided, and we're on the verge of being conquered. Again, how do we liberate ourselves from this? We have to awaken our hearts within each of us, and we have to look at what our ancestors have given us and not throw away our legacy. Our legacy is our future. Without that, we have only despair and a new dark age that will descend upon us like nothing we've ever known. We have to fight to keep the flame of liberty alive, and that's truly no cliche. And it was Ronald Reagan who said we are only one liberty or one generation away from the extinguishment of liberty. He said something along those lines, So we need to, and that's another reason for the Life and Liberty Party, is to raise up and to mentor a new generation of leaders that understand the importance of maintaining this legacy of freedom, this heritage of constitutional liberty, the republic, that we can't let this notion die, because look at how many people are trying to snuff it out actively right now as we speak. We are a small remnant really at this point, but that doesn't mean that we are hopeless. We have great hope because we have the truth and we have history on our side. And I believe that it's just a matter of reawakening the young people and reawakening the remembrance of some of the older people and getting them to not be so apathetic and not so wrapped up in their games or their sports or whatever it is that's distracting them from reality, but get back into reality and understand your civic responsibility and exercise your liberty while you still can. We need to encourage a total vote reform in our electoral system. We need a verifiable paper ballots. We need precinct judges. We need candidates for all kinds of local offices that go uncontested. So for people that tell me that they're bored and they can't do anything, I say that's a bunch of hogwash. You can do anything. The system's really open. It's screaming for people to be involved. Literally, the system's dying for apathy. Come on, right? We know that.
Yeah, so, I do feel a lot of people have just dropped out of the voting process because they don't feel that it makes a difference. And they'd rather just live in apathy. And so I don't know if you remember hearing a psychological study that was done on these rats that were they're basically closed in a small space where they had to compete for resources with each other.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Did you ever you remember that study? I can't remember what it was called.
City or something. Yeah.
yeah, as the conditions got worse and worse within the climate in the environment, different groups would start to behave different ways. And I always remember the group that they call the beautiful ones. They didn't want to fight. They didn't want to get in the fight. They didn't want to get hurt. They didn't want to get bitten. So they would just go isolate themselves from the rest of society and basically focus on preening themselves, like licking their fur. And they called them the beautiful ones because they were just focused
Beautiful.
inward. And I think that's what's kind of happening. Yeah, it's a form of showing apathy. So
Right.
I think in some ways our culture is like that. They're focused on pleasure seeking because they feel hopeless about the crisis around. And so it's some people's method and way of dealing with problems. And so for me, I just think, what a shame for our young people. What happened to the American dream?
Mm-hmm.
The dream that we used to have, where people were interested in owning a home, owning a private property. These days, like, the millennials don't want to be attached to anything. They want to, it's like, to be able to afford a house is out of reach now.
Right.
To be able to afford that American dream is out of reach now. And so a lot of this comes from increased taxes. Even Elizabeth Warren, one time, I remember listening to her. I remember using a speech that she gave one time in some of my classes, like 10 years ago, before she was ever on the political scene. And she did research. Her Harvard team did research showing the major difference between why the American dream was so much more attainable in the 70s than it is now, and especially even in the 50s, right? And so she was saying most of the things, lifestyle things, have not changed. The thing that has dramatically increased over time is government taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is what's causing even two-income households to not be able to support themselves, when back in the 50s, a one-income household could support themselves and live that American dream. So to me, one of the aspects of this, it all goes back to being able to have private property,
Right.
which is something that the federal government is usurping more and more.
Yeah.
And we need to find a way to restore that private property into the hands of the people so that they can have that American dream. They can have hope for the future.
Right. I think the federal government, we've gotten to a point of dependency on the federal government. And part of that was, as the westward expansion occurred, the federal government just retained more and more of the lands unto itself, in contradiction to the equal footing doctrine. So all the states were supposed to enter the union on an equal footing, but that didn't really happen. Now you have states in the West where as much as over 80% of the land, or maybe even 90% of Nevada, is controlled by the federal government, and that was never the intent. And so we have this centralization of power in Washington, D.C., and then they own all these resources, and then they're like, well, if you're good citizens, and we might be able to get this program through that we can send you a check to help you out, and we'll dole it out to you a little bit, the stuff that belongs to the people anyway, right? So they've mismanaged our resources, grossly mismanaged our resources, enriched themselves, created the good old boys and good old girls networks throughout the land, and the people suffer while the riches are plundered and exploited. So how do you turn that around? Well, you have to go back again to the founding intent. The constitutional intent was never for the federal government to own all these lands and riches. So what do we need to do? We need to transition these federal lands back to the states and back to the people, back to a more of a, what, if you will, free enterprise model, and that will unleash the creativity, the entrepreneurship of the citizens. We know government programs are not really designed to unleash creativity. They're more of a managerial type of, bureaucrat. Governments are good at being bureaucrats, right? So they can manage resources, but they can't lead to innovation. We don't see governments leading to great innovation. Usually it's, the individual, the corporate or small company. And so it's private enterprise. It's based on private property rights, is what I'm saying. You know, that creative
Yeah.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. The pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of property. They're
Yeah.
intricately connected. So without that private property, you don't really have that ability to pursue happiness because, oh, well, the government controls all the means. So I want to go to the store and I want to buy this. Oh, do you have your government permit to get that? Oh, no. Well, you give me $50 and I might give you a permit next month or whatever. Yeah, I know. So it just freezes and seizes everything creative and entrepreneurial. So we need to, you know, break through that mindset that's been put on us falsely that the government should be in control of these lands and these resources to begin with. It was never the constitutional intent. And moving from that, I would go to the the presidency itself and the ruling by presidential edict and presidential executive order. And I think that my first duty, if I were to be elected and to go to Washington, D.C. and be in the White House, would be to review and to dismantle most of the unconstitutional executive orders, because we don't have an imperial presidency. We should have a more balanced government. And it's a mistake for people to look towards the federal government as the end-all, see-all, but also within the federal government to see the president as the, you know, main, as like a dictator or a king. That was a total mistake. The president is not a dictator or a king. The president is more like a corporate executive officer subject to a, you know, board of directors, right? They're not like you know, they can't just go run amok and do their own thing because they think it's a good idea and it sounds good and it feels good, and well, I can get the support for this will help me get reelected or whatever, you know, will enrich my friends or my family or whatever. No. And I'm not saying that about any particular president. I'm just saying in general, the presidency has aggrandized much power and authority unto itself over the years, and I've witnessed it in my lifetime. And we need to reverse that trend in line with all of the other constitutional reforms that need to happen. So we need, you know, to reverse the trend of the government centralization of power, the government control of property, the government control of the laws. We need to just decentralize all of that stuff according to the Constitution so that we can free the people up, because we have the greatest entrepreneurial spirit, really. If we just allow it to be free, I think we can solve almost any problem or dilemma if our people are allowed to do so. But we find ourselves, you know, hamstrung. We find ourselves, you know, tied up. We're already greatly in bondage, if you will, we placed under so far, and not allow ourselves to go any further into any further bondage, right? So we must use the liberties that remain to free ourselves and restore the liberties that we once enjoyed, so that we can have prosperity and we can have a hopeful future for our children and our grandchildren. And that's the vision that I hope we can help to ignite, because we're really kind of catalysts in this process. So that's really about all I had to say. We're just about over an hour. Did you have any closing comments, Tiara?
The only thing I'd like to say is that I still believe that Americans are resilient and we can get through anything. I remember just during all this terrible news with the COVID and also with the riots, and a lot of people have been very discouraged and just ready to throw in the towel, so to speak, you know. And people have been talking to me with their concerns about all the things that have been going on. And for me, I think I just thought of the scripture that concept that came to mind that says, "This too shall pass." You know, for me, that's who we are as Americans. We're resilient people. We've been through a lot before. We've overcome a lot, and we will continue to overcome whatever challenges come our way. I think that we can pull together eventually, and America still can see its best days ahead of it.
Well, thank you. And I do think we offer a vision of hope for the people. And again, that vision is based on our legacy, truly just embracing our legacy. Reinterpreting it for the future, but really stand standing fast on that constitutional foundation for our constitutional republic. And if people are interested, so that's spelled out lifeandliberty.com. And our campaign website is, my campaign's website is John Richard Myers, MYERS.com, johnrichardmyers.com. And then I have a Facebook, J.R. Myers for President. And we have Life and Liberty Party Facebooks for every state and territory. We're trying to anyway. I think we have covered everyone so far. And how about you, Tiara?
Oh,
As far as
if you want to
contact
follow
information.
my pages on Facebook and Twitter, you just look for me under my name, Tiara Lusk. And I write articles for think tanks, research-based articles, and connected to political issues. So if you'd like to see some of my articles, you can go to my Facebook and my Twitter, and apparently TikTok and Instagram page were set up for me this morning. So just search for my name, Tiara Lusk.
Oh, awesome. Well, we had a little okay, great. And then I just wanted to remind everybody that support our cause through the party and or our campaign financially, as well as becoming activists in your and volunteers in your local areas. We need everybody that's available. So no contribution or effort is too insignificant. We need all the help we can get because it's definitely an uphill battle. And but we're doing it not for our own selves, we're doing it for the future, and we're doing it for the people. We're trying to give a voice to the people so that you can have a platform to stand on in your own communities and speak out, and we'll be there to have your back. And we're just asking you now to have our backs. So on that note, I'm going to close it, and I just wanted to thank you, Tiara and Lori, for helping behind the scenes here. And this concludes our first campaign Zoom broadcast. There will be more, so stay tuned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
I'm leaving the meeting.